Welcome to News Edge, your sharpest source for daily headlines and deep dives. If you're new here, don't forget to hit that subscribe button and stay ahead of the curve. On a brisk September day in Brussels, the heart of European politics, the city buzzed with anticipation. The European Parliament stood as a symbol of unity and shared values, but beneath the surface, a sense of urgency was growing. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky took the stage, his presence commanding the attention of every leader in the room. With NATO's new Secretary General Mark Rutte by his side, Zelensky delivered a stark and sobering warning to Europe's most powerful decision-makers. He didn't mince words. Zelensky urged Europe to provide unwavering long-term security commitments, not just as a gesture of support, but as a vital necessity. He emphasized that this was not only about helping Ukraine win its war for survival, but about securing lasting peace and stability for the entire European continent. Zelensky argued passionately that Ukraine's defense is Europe's defense. He reminded the assembly that a strong, sovereign Ukraine stands as the best barrier against Russian aggression, acting as a shield that protects the freedoms and security of all European nations. He called for the immediate delivery of advanced air defense systems, highlighting the urgent need for modern technology to protect Ukrainian cities and civilians. Zelensky stressed that every delay in support costs not only Ukrainian lives but also undermines European security, making the continent more vulnerable to future threats. In a bold move, Zelensky floated the possibility of a ceasefire, but only under strict conditions. He insisted that any pause in fighting must be backed by ironclad NATO security guarantees and a steady, reliable flow of advanced weaponry. Without these, he warned, any ceasefire would be fragile and short-lived. This powerful message put the burden squarely on Europe's shoulders. Would European leaders rise to the occasion and commit to a just and lasting peace? Or would they hesitate and risk leaving Ukraine exposed to further aggression? Zelensky's message was clear and urgent. Hesitation and indecision only increase the cost, not just for Ukraine, but for all of Europe. The stakes, he warned, could not be higher. As Zelensky concluded his visit, his direct appeal echoed through the halls of Brussels. He called on Europe to make a historic choice, to invest in a democratic victory and a secure future, or to risk a continent shaped by authoritarian force. The decision, he reminded them, would define Europe's legacy for generations to come. In Brussels, Zelensky's plea for urgent assistance echoed through the grand halls of the European Council. European leaders responded with a chorus of strong words, voicing their unwavering support for Ukraine's struggle. Their statements were filled with empathy and resolve, making it clear that Ukraine's fight was not being ignored by the West. They pledged practical help, promising to send more weapons, more ammunition, and increased humanitarian aid. Shipments of military equipment were announced, and convoys of supplies began moving eastward. Yet despite these commitments, the leaders stopped short of granting Ukraine its most urgent and ambitious requests. Fast-tracked NATO membership, a key demand from Kyiv, remained out of reach. European leaders, wary of provoking a wider conflict, were unwilling to accelerate the process. Behind closed doors, discussions revealed deep divisions and concerns about the risks of moving too quickly. The idea of sending European peacekeepers was quietly shelved. Direct military involvement, it was decided, would be too risky and could escalate the war beyond Ukraine's borders. The prospect of European boots on the ground was simply a step too far for most leaders. Instead, Europe chose to arm Ukraine from a distance, providing robust support while maintaining a careful distance from the front lines. This strategy allowed them to show solidarity and commitment, but also to avoid direct confrontation with Russia. By keeping their involvement indirect, European nations could help Ukraine defend itself without risking a direct military clash with Moscow. This approach was seen as the safest way to balance their moral responsibility with the realities of geopolitics. The meetings in Brussels revealed a continent deeply invested in Ukraine's survival, but also one that is cautious, carefully weighing every step, and wary of crossing certain lines that could draw them into open war. Europe has become Ukraine's arsenal and its most vocal political champion, rallying public support and sending vital aid. But when it comes to fighting side by side, the continent remains hesitant. The support is robust, generous, and ongoing, but always carefully measured. Ukraine fights on with Western arms and European backing, but without Western soldiers on its front lines. For now, Europe stands firmly behind Ukraine, but not beside it in battle. Overshadowing every discussion in Brussels was the possibility of Donald Trump's return to the White House. European leaders remember his America First approach and open skepticism of NATO. The fear a Trump presidency could mean reduced or withdrawn U.S. support for Ukraine. This has forced Europe to consider whether it can fill the gap if America steps back, accelerating efforts to strengthen its own defense and unity. The uncertainty is a wake-up call. Europe must prepare for a future where it stands on its own. Europe's anxiety over the unpredictable nature of U.S. politics reveals a deeper, more persistent truth: its long-standing dependence on American power and influence. This concern isn't just about the latest headlines or political drama in Washington. It's rooted in decades of history and a relationship that has shaped the very fabric of modern Europe. Since the end of World War II, Europe has relied heavily on the United States for military protection, economic support, and technological innovation. The Marshall Plan, American troops stationed across the continent, and U.S.-led initiatives have all played a crucial role in rebuilding and securing Europe. This dependency is deeply embedded in institutions like NATO, the interconnected economies, and even the digital infrastructure that powers European societies. As a result, Europe's security, prosperity, and technological progress are often tied to decisions made in Washington, leaving the continent vulnerable to sudden shifts in American policy or leadership. For decades, this arrangement brought unprecedented peace and prosperity to Europe. It allowed nations to focus on growth and integration, but it also bred a sense of complacency, discouraging the development of true strategic autonomy and self-reliance. Now, as questions about U.S. reliability and commitment grow louder, Europe is forced to confront the consequences of its choices. The continent must grapple with the reality that its future cannot be outsourced. Too often, Europe's foreign policy is reactive, shaped by American priorities rather than its own long-term interests. This has limited Europe's ability to act independently on the world stage. The challenge is now unmistakable. Europe must step out of America's shadow, invest in its own defense, foster innovation, and build the capacity to act decisively. Only by doing so can it secure its interests and shape its own destiny. Only then can Europe truly emerge as a global power in its own right, ready to face the challenges of an uncertain world with confidence and unity. Europe's struggle for global influence is hampered by its own internal divisions. With 27 member states, the EU often fails to speak with one voice, undermining its credibility and effectiveness. Disagreements over issues like the Israel-Palestine conflict and relations with China reveal deep fractures. This disunity allows rivals to exploit Europe's weaknesses and forces the EU to follow America's lead. Until Europe overcomes these divisions, it will remain a secondary player, unable to assert its own identity. Unity is the missing ingredient for true European power. Strategic autonomy is a favorite phrase in Brussels, but the reality falls short. Europe still relies on American military, economic, and technological power. Even after cutting Russian gas, many countries simply switched to American energy. U.S. tech giants dominate Europe's digital landscape, limiting policy independence. Defense initiatives like PESCO have yet to produce a force capable of acting without U.S. support. The war in Ukraine exposed how far Europe is from true self-sufficiency. Without real investment and political will, autonomy remains an illusion. As Trump's return becomes more likely, some European leaders are shifting to appeasement. They're buying more American weapons and prioritizing deals that please Washington, hoping to maintain the alliance. Critics warn this only deepens Europe's subordinate position and encourages more demands from the U.S. Instead of defining its own interests, Europe is adjusting to American preferences. This is not partnership, it's dependency. True security will come from building strength and unity, not from appeasing any U.S. president. Europe faces a crossroads: continue its dependency, or embrace a revolution in self-reliance. The old strategy of reacting to Washington is unsustainable. Europe must confront its weaknesses and commit to building real independent power. This means bold thinking, new partnerships, and a willingness to take risks for its own security. Leadership requires responsibility. Europe must become a producer, not just a consumer, of security. The challenge is immense, but so is the opportunity. The time for a self-reliant Europe is now. Zelensky's plea is a mirror for Europe's own vulnerability. The era of comfortable dependency is over. Europe must choose its own path. Reacting to crises is no longer enough. Europe needs a shared vision and real investment in its own defense and unity. Tactical fixes won't solve the deeper problem. Europe's future will be decided by its own leaders and citizens, not by events in Washington or Moscow. The question: will Europe rise to the challenge and become truly sovereign, or remain a diminished power? Zelensky has shown what it means to fight for destiny. Now Europe must find the courage to do the same.